So I painted this scene of a house across a lake, but of course it wasn't easy. It came with bugs and heat and distractions, and as usual, there's always resistance when you're trying to make something. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. Resistance in art. Let's go. I think resistance is something that everyone's kind of familiar with, everyone has felt, but I think for myself personally, it's something that has gone unnamed for a long time. But recently, I read this book called The War of Art, and it really put everything into perspective and put a name to what I kind of been dealing with for a while. So I wanted to read some short quotes from the book, and I'm sure you'll relate to them if you're creative or painter. Resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a work and potential. It's a repelling force, it's negative, its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. Resistance seems to come from outside ourselves. We locate it in spouses, jobs, bosses, kids, peripheral opponents. Resistance is not a peripheral opponent. Resistance arises from within. It is self generated and self perpetuated. Resistance is the enemy within. What does resistance feel like? First, unhappiness. A low grade misery pervades everything. We're bored, we're restless, we can't get satisfaction. There's guilt, but we can't put our finger on the source. We want to go back to bed. We want to get up and party. We feel unloved and unlovable. We're disgusted. We hate our lives. We hate ourselves. Procrastination is the most common manifestation of resistance because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my symphony. Instead, we say, I'm going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow. And just going over those little highlighted blurbs I have really makes me want to reread this book again because I remember the first time I read this book, it was just so on the nose. And it speaks about resistance and the fact that any noble act, any act of creativity, any attempt at ascending to your higher self is instantly going to be met with resistance. And I think that's kind of a good sign, though. The book later on speaks about how meeting resistance isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's actually a very telling thing, and that you can use resistance as your sort of North Star, as your compass needle. And I think resistance takes a lot of different forms. As you heard there earlier, procrastination is certainly one of them. But I think for me, a lot of my resistance has been through idealism and sort of just waiting until things are better, waiting until things are uh, more fit, waiting until I fully rationalize a situation to act. And like thinking of it that way, resistance has me beat without even doing anything to me. And to make a quick analogy to sports, in mixed martial arts, there's sort of two different realms. There's striking, which is punching and kicking, and then there's grappling, which is grabbing and wrestling and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes you'll see an outstanding striker, someone who can throw really good punches, really good kicks, go up against someone who is a bad striker, but a really good wrestler. And just the sake, just the fact that they have good wrestling makes the striker ineffective because they're so worried about having to deal with the wrestling. And so I feel like a lot of times resistance does that, where while you may have the tools, just the fact that you aren't doing anything with them is making you completely ineffective. And sometimes when you're watching a fight like that, it's so frustrating. You're looking at the striker and thinking, throw your strikes, work, move your hands, get something going. And they often don't. And it's out of fear or it's out of just being too tentative. And I would imagine that's exactly what God would look down and say on us. Like, you have the tools, you have the skills, like, you have the desire, but there's obviously something that you're letting stall you out. In the making of this painting, my biggest stalls with resistance were first that really bad try, that first attempt at the painting, which I put a lot of time into, and I put a lot of thought into. I framed up the painting. I had a plan for the composition and everything, and then for it to just really not work out was something that sometimes has completely beaten me. There's been times where I've gone out for a painting and I've come back with nothing because I'll have a failed attempt and it gets frustrating and the heat gets to me and everything just seems like, well, it's not really, this isn't meant for me to work out. But I think the second attempt turned out much better, much, much, much better. And it wasn't like I did anything different, it was just a different shot, just trying again. Coming up here in a second, we're going to have a little conversation with the guy that walks past me. I think it's fitting, I think it's nice, and I think maybe you guys will enjoy it.
First attempt?
No. No, I started out painting over there, and it went kind of bad, but
Over where?
I like that little bit over there, and I just
Uh-huh.
couldn't finish it, so I just...
Watercolor's difficult, dude.
Are you a painter?
Hard to outline.
You a painter, artist, kind of?
Dabble.
Well, what do you do? Watercolor, acrylic, gouache?
Well, I've been a home remodeling professional my whole life,
That's cool.
and that was my artistic outlet. We get done building a beautiful staircase, and they hand you $5,000. Boy, it feels good.
Yeah, that's artistic too. That's beautiful.
But I've got all sorts of art supplies, and been thinking about getting back into it. My father had a business called,
Okay.
and he did artwork, but he did the copper plates for doing lithographs.
Okay. Yeah, I know that.
And he was meeting famous artists from all over New England, and they're bringing their work to him, and he would transpose the picture,
To get them on like print plates and stuff.
yeah, to put them on plates and then roll out. So posters and shit that you saw back in the 80s,
That's sick.
he did that shit. Pookie,
That's really cool.
where'd he go?
See you, man. Hope you find your dog.
So, where does that leave us? Well, the author, Stephen Pressfield, argues that the one way to beat resistance is to turn pro, to become so dedicated that whatever stands in your way is instantly beat by discipline. Think small drips on a stone. It's interesting, too, that while the author does recommend going pro in the physical sense, as in doing your craft for money, because they say that the pro has stake in the game and the pro has something to lose, they do say that turning pro should not just be for money, and that to labor in the arts for any reason other than love is prostitution. I just think that's really interesting. Turn pro, and resistance will fade. Another form of resistance is right here. It started raining, and as usual, I just pack up, head back home, and I finish the painting there. I'd like to finish with the final quote from the book. It says, "The ego doesn't want us to evolve. The ego runs the show right now. It likes things just the way they are. The instinct that pulls us towards art is the impulse to evolve, to learn, to heighten and elevate our consciousness. The ego hates this, because the more awake we become, the less we need the ego." So, attack your resistance, turn pro, and I'll see you guys later.